Now sitting with Professor Mayer Zald at the University of Michigan, and Mayer and I have had a couple of conversations over the past year about some topics in the philosophy of the social sciences, the way that the social sciences have progressed, and I'm very happy to be able to sit and have a conversation today about some of Mayer's thinking about how sociology has progressed and what new possibilities might exist for the social sciences, for sociology in particular. I don't know every element of your career, Mayer, but I know enough to be very impressed. And the articles that I've read over the past 6 months have just been tremendously interesting. So I think this will be a very interesting conversation, and I thank you for agreeing to be a part of it.
Quite willing, quite willing.
Maybe I could start with a question about that I find very intriguing, and I have never felt that I've had a satisfactory answer. It's a deceptively simple question, but it is the question, how do you define the social world or the object of study for sociology? What is your definition of a social fact or a social thing?
Well, there are a couple different questions rolled up in all of that. There's a meta question about what is the social, and then how that then shapes or does not, or whether that in fact shapes what sociologists do. And I think there's a big disjunction between those two. So there's a broad definition of the social that would have to do with the unique capabilities of man, communications, symbol making, symbol using, interaction. And so that's kind of a social psychological, but pretty much the standard demarcation for sociology and anthropology, I think. But then if you then try and carry that forward, well, there are people who do sociolinguistics, and there are a small group folks who come close to working on that, but when you take that all the way forward into the trend of modern sociology away from the micro foundations of social interaction, then sociology starts getting very distant from the significating animal that most of our core definitions assume as the rough boundary between humankind and animal kind, even if the ethologists and others are showing that there's more meaning making amongst different species than our old hard and fast line used to assume. So I think that line still makes a good deal of sense, at least in scope and variety of communication. Although I'm not enough of an ethology follower to know whether the ethologists would agree with that as a firm demarcation.
Mm-hmm. Now, I find it interesting that you are starting at the level of the individual, but you start with the symbolic and the communicative as opposed to the rational and the purposive. Is that a deliberate choice on your part?
Yeah, I don't know whether forms of rationality, the emphasis upon rationality as it relates to social science, is a big problematic in sociology, as you know. The debates over rational choice of the use and non-use in my own department. Peggy Summers has attempted to knock the hell out of rational choice and historical sociology, and as an approach to historical sociology. And so I think first, I would not argue against forms of rationality as going along with it, but the forms of rationality are in fact empowered by the significating capabilities. You can sign a lot you can do a lot of significating and be irrational or non-rational. Mm-hmm. So there's many components to linguistic behavior.
I'm just intrigued.
Yeah.
So you would put the symbolic, the linguistic interaction, the communicative at the core, and then the more purposive, rational means and problem solving, that would be a secondary in this telling of the story.
Right. That would be and I don't know enough about this I'm sure that there are anthropologists who've thought a lot about this, and physical anthropologists and so on. And I don't know that literature, but I don't know what we would mean by rationality without language.
Yes.
And an ability to do abstraction.
No, that's fair.
And this is remember I was trained. My first training is or as a graduate student was in social psychology, and if you're a social psychologist, George Herbert Mead and Charles Horton Cooley are the founding fathers for American social psychology, and if anything, especially Mead, this would be a straight median line of analysis, it seems to me. So that may show my origins.
Well, that's very interesting. In a couple minutes, I'm going to want to talk about social movements and the great work that you've done over so many years, over
Right.
social mobilization. But I'll be curious to see how this kind of guiding framework fits into those.
Or does
assumptions.
not. Whether they, in fact, leaps across chasms.
Well, that'll be interesting.
Right.
A minute or so ago, you said this is the micro foundations part, and I kind of went off on is it rationality or is it symbolic?
Right.
But you were kind of implying that maybe there's a break also between this level of description and the things that sociologists actually study.
Right.
I think you were sort of implying that maybe they're more macro, not so micro foundational.
Well, certainly that's the way the field has gone, and certainly the way my own career has gone. Although I was trained as a social psychologist, most people don't know that, and they're very shocked when I tell them that, because all of my stuff has been at the meso level, the organizations. I don't do big macro, historical civilizations. There's a touch of that in a little bit of my work, but not much. But I'm not a state theorist or world system theorist type. But I have always, except one or two papers, don't show that early social psychology training. And so I'm at the institutional level, the organizational level, collectivity level, and while signing and symboling are important parts of those enterprises, all of those, I have not actually been a social psychologist in the social movement literature, nor in the organizational literature. So there is that break where you assume the base in language rather than studying how it is used. If you were to look at for people who probe the micro foundations, the ethnomethodologists, I was always fascinated by them, but never practiced that art.
So the ethnomethodologist in organizational theory might be the person who actually goes to the insurance office and interviews the claims adjuster and the boss and so forth.
And watches their interaction and so on, and how the language ends up fitting and how they communicate within that setting. People like, I think it's Don Zimmerman and Harold Garfinkel himself, the founder. And I once thought that was going to be the great hot topic. I thought they really were onto something, and it has not, within sociology, it has not ended up being the great hot topic.